Welcome to Stoic Vivu, where we transform ancient wisdom into practical guidance for your modern life. I'm here to help you discover something remarkable that philosophers figured out over 2,000 years ago. Something that can completely change how you experience happiness starting today. Let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever gotten exactly what you wanted, only to find yourself wanting something else within days or weeks? Maybe you finally got that promotion, bought that car, moved to that apartment, or hit that follower count. But the satisfaction faded faster than you expected. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone, and more importantly, you're not broken. You've simply been taught to look for happiness in all the wrong places. Here's what most people never realize. The endless cycle of wanting more, achieving goals, feeling briefly satisfied, then wanting more again isn't a bug in the human system. It's actually how our minds are designed to work. But here's the fascinating part that ancient Stoic philosophers discovered. You can step off this exhausting treadmill completely and find genuine contentment with what you already have right now. The Stoics were practical philosophers who lived in the real world. Marcus Aurelius ran the Roman Empire while writing his personal reflections on happiness. Seneca was a wealthy businessman who understood the temptation of always wanting more. Epictetus went from slavery to becoming one of history's most influential teachers. These weren't ivory tower theorists. They were people facing real challenges who developed bulletproof methods for finding peace and joy regardless of external circumstances. Think about this for a moment. What if the secret to happiness isn't getting more stuff, more success, or more recognition? What if it's actually learning to see the abundance that already surrounds you? What if contentment isn't about changing your life, but about changing how you see your life? Today, we're going to explore exactly how to make this shift. You'll discover why your brain keeps telling you that happiness is always one purchase, one achievement, or one relationship away. More importantly, you'll learn the specific mental tools that Stoic philosophers use to find deep satisfaction with their present circumstances. We'll examine why some of the most successful people in the world are surprisingly miserable, while others with much less seem genuinely content. You'll understand the crucial difference between healthy ambition and the kind of restless craving that steals your peace. Most practically, you'll walk away with concrete techniques you can start using immediately to appreciate what you already have. This isn't about giving up your dreams or settling for less. It's about discovering a foundation of happiness that doesn't depend on external circumstances. It's about learning to be truly wealthy in the way that matters most, which is feeling genuinely satisfied with your life as it exists right now. The ancient Stoics called this wisdom practical philosophy because it works in real life with real problems in real time. Let's begin this journey together and discover how their timeless insights can transform your relationship with happiness itself. 1. Transform your mindset about having enough. Seneca's wisdom. Imagine this scenario. Sarah Martinez steps out of her Manhattan office building at 7 p.m., finally finishing another 12-hour day at her marketing firm. She earns 6 figures, drives a luxury car, and lives in a beautiful apartment overlooking the city. Yet, as she stands on the sidewalk waiting for her ride, she feels a familiar emptiness gnawing at her chest. Despite everything she's achieved, she can't shake the feeling that she's still not where she's supposed to be in life. Sarah's experience illustrates a profound truth that the Roman philosopher Seneca understood 20 centuries ago. Seneca was one of the wealthiest men in the Roman Empire, an advisor to emperors, and owner of vast estates across the Mediterranean. Yet he discovered something that completely revolutionized how he thought about having enough. He realized that poverty isn't about having too little money or possessions. Instead, Seneca defined poverty as wanting more than what you have. This insight cuts straight to the heart of why so many successful people feel perpetually dissatisfied. When Seneca said that poverty is wanting more, he was pointing to a mental trap that catches almost everyone in our achievement-oriented culture. Think about it this way. If your sense of having enough depends on getting more, then you'll never actually have enough. The goalpost keeps moving further away every time you get close to it. Let me help you understand why this happens. Your brain has a built-in mechanism called hedonic adaptation. This means that whenever you get something you've been wanting, your brain quickly adjusts to this new normal and starts looking for the next thing to desire. It's like climbing a ladder where each rung you reach becomes the new ground level, and you immediately start reaching for the next rung above. Scientists have studied lottery winners and found that after an initial spike in happiness, most return to their baseline emotional state within months. Seneca observed this exact pattern in his own life and in the lives of wealthy Romans around him. He watched people accumulate enormous fortunes, political power, and social status, yet remain fundamentally unhappy. These individuals weren't poor in any material sense, but they were spiritually impoverished because they couldn't stop wanting more. They were like people dying of thirst while standing next to a well, too busy looking for other water sources to drink from what was right in front of them. Here's where Seneca's wisdom becomes practically transformative for your daily life. He discovered that true wealth comes from appreciating what you already possess rather than constantly pursuing what you lack. This doesn't mean giving up all ambitions or goals. Instead, it means building your foundation of contentment on gratitude for your present circumstances rather than hope for future acquisitions. Consider how this applies to Sarah's situation. She's achieved more professional success than millions of people dream about, yet she feels poor because she's focused entirely on what she still doesn't have. Maybe she's comparing herself to colleagues who seem more successful, or she's fixated on the next promotion that might finally make her feel accomplished. Perhaps she's scrolling through social media, seeing other people's highlight reels and feeling inadequate about her own accomplishments. Either way, she's trapped in Seneca's definition of poverty, wanting more despite having plenty. The Stoic solution isn't to stop working or pursuing excellence. Rather, it's to recognize the abundance that already exists in your life right now. Seneca practiced a mental exercise where he would regularly catalog everything he had to be grateful for, from basic necessities like food and shelter to relationships, experiences, and opportunities for growth. He would remind himself that he had access to clean water, something that billions of people throughout history couldn't take for granted. He appreciated having books to read, meaningful work to do, and friends to share ideas with. This practice works because it trains your mind to notice wealth rather than scarcity. When you deliberately focus on what you have instead of what you lack, you begin to see richness everywhere. You start appreciating the luxury of clean water from your tap, the miracle of technology that connects you to people around the world, the comfort of a warm bed, or the privilege of education that allows you to understand complex concepts like these. You notice the abundance of choices available to you each day, from what to eat for breakfast to how to spend your free time. Seneca also taught that true security comes from needing very little rather than having very much. This principle can liberate you from the anxiety of constantly protecting and expanding your possessions. When you discover how little you actually need to be content, You become genuinely wealthy because you're no longer vulnerable to the fear of loss that haunts people who depend on external things for their happiness. You realize that your peace of mind doesn't have to fluctuate with your bank account or social status. The practical application of this wisdom starts with a simple daily practice that you can begin immediately. Each evening, spend 5 minutes identifying 3 specific things you possessed or experienced that day that you're genuinely grateful for. Be concrete and detailed rather than general. Instead of saying you're grateful for your job, appreciate the particular conversation you had with a colleague, the problem you solved, or even the coffee that helped you focus during an important meeting. Notice the satisfaction of completing a task, the pleasure of a good meal, or the comfort of coming home to a safe place. This exercise gradually rewires your brain to notice abundance instead of scarcity. Over time, you'll find yourself naturally appreciating everyday experiences that you previously took for granted. You'll discover what Seneca knew, which is that the person who appreciates what they have is genuinely richer than the person who has everything but appreciates nothing. You'll start to feel wealthy not because you've acquired more, but because you've learned to see the wealth that was already surrounding you. Seneca summarized this transformation beautifully when he wrote that every new thing excites the mind, but a mind that seeks the truth turns inward and is satisfied with itself. When you learn to find satisfaction in what you already possess, you break free from the exhausting cycle of constantly needing more to feel complete. Ultimately, transforming your relationship with having enough begins with understanding that sufficiency is a mental state rather than a financial condition. When you master this shift in perspective, you discover a form of wealth that no economic downturn can take away and no achievement can improve upon. With this foundation of gratitude and recognition of present abundance firmly established, we can now explore how to break free from the specific trap that keeps so many people perpetually chasing happiness in all the wrong places. 2. Stop chasing tomorrow's happiness. Start living today. Consider this scene. Jessica Chun sits in her Los Angeles apartment at midnight, laptop glowing as she scrolls through client emails and social media notifications. As a freelance graphic designer, she's finally landed some bigger projects, but instead of celebrating, she's already worrying about the next contract. Her mind races with thoughts like, once I get that corporate client, I'll finally feel secure, and when I hit 50,000 followers, I'll know I've made it. Meanwhile, the beautiful work she completed today sits unappreciated on her desk, and the progress she's made over the past year feels invisible to her. Jessica has fallen into what the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius identified as one of humanity's most destructive patterns. Marcus Aurelius, who had access to every pleasure and achievement the ancient world could offer, wrote in his personal journal that we could be happy today, but instead we choose tomorrow. This observation cuts to the core of why so many people feel perpetually unsatisfied despite making genuine progress in their lives. Think about how this pattern operates in your own experience. You tell yourself that you'll be truly happy when you get the promotion, when you find the right relationship, when you lose those extra pounds, when you buy that house, or when you finally achieve whatever goal currently dominates your thinking. This mental habit creates what psychologists call conditional happiness, where your current emotional state depends entirely on future circumstances that may or may not occur. Here's what makes this trap so insidious. Your brain is designed to focus on problems and gaps rather than successes and completions. This served our ancestors well when they needed to stay alert to dangers and opportunities for survival. However, in modern life, This same mechanism keeps you perpetually focused on what's missing rather than what's present. You achieve something you've been working toward for months, feel good for a few days, then immediately shift your attention to the next challenge or deficiency. Marcus Aurelius understood this tendency because he lived it personally. Despite being the most powerful person in the known world, he struggled with the same mental patterns that challenge you today. He had to remind himself repeatedly that happiness is a choice available in the present moment, not a reward waiting in the future. His insight was revolutionary because it revealed that the timing of happiness is entirely under your control. The emperor's wisdom becomes practical when you understand what it means to choose happiness today. This isn't about pretending everything is perfect or ignoring real problems that need attention. Instead, it's about recognizing that satisfaction and contentment can coexist with challenges and future goals. You can appreciate your current circumstances while simultaneously working to improve them. Let's return to Jessica's situation to see how this works in practice. Instead of treating her current success as merely a stepping stone to something better, she could learn to genuinely celebrate the beautiful design work she completed today. She could appreciate the trust her clients place in her creative vision, the satisfaction of solving visual problems, and the freedom that comes with being her own boss. These positive aspects of her current reality are available for appreciation right now, regardless of whether she lands that corporate contract next month. Marcus Aurelius developed a specific mental practice to combat the tomorrow trap. Each morning, he would remind himself that the day ahead contained opportunities for gratitude, growth, and contribution that were available immediately, not contingent on future achievements. He wrote that the universe is change, and our experience is what we make of it. This means that your happiness depends more on how you interpret your current circumstances than on the circumstances themselves. The practical application of this wisdom requires developing what we might call present moment awareness. This involves regularly asking yourself what aspects of your current situation deserve appreciation. Instead of automatically focusing on what needs to be different or better, you consciously direct your attention to what's working well right now. This might include relationships you enjoy, skills you've developed, experiences that brought you pleasure, or simply the basic comfort and safety that allow you to pursue your goals. This practice doesn't eliminate ambition or motivation. Rather, it provides a stable foundation of contentment that makes your pursuit of future goals more enjoyable and less desperate. When you're genuinely satisfied with your present circumstances, you can work toward improvements from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. Your efforts become expressions of creativity and growth rather than desperate attempts to escape dissatisfaction. Marcus Aurelius also taught that each day offers what he called sufficient material for happiness. This means that regardless of your external circumstances, you can find reasons for contentment and joy in the immediate present. You might find this material in a conversation with a friend, the completion of a meaningful task, a moment of natural beauty, or even the simple pleasure of a good meal or comfortable rest. The emperor's approach requires retraining your brain to notice positive aspects of your current experience that you typically overlook. Most people are excellent at cataloging what's wrong, missing, or inadequate in their lives, but they've never developed the skill of recognizing what's right, present, and satisfactory. This isn't about forced optimism or denial of real problems. It's about developing a more balanced and accurate perception of your actual circumstances. One powerful technique Marcus Aurelius used was evening reflection. Each night, he would review the day not just for mistakes or missed opportunities, but specifically for moments of satisfaction, progress, and genuine contentment that he experienced. This practice helped him recognize that happiness wasn't something he needed to achieve in the future, but something he could access in the present by paying attention to it. The transformation happens gradually as you build this new mental habit. Instead of constantly deferring satisfaction until conditions improve, you begin to find genuine contentment in your daily experience. You still maintain goals and work toward improvements, but these efforts enhance an already satisfying life rather than serving as desperate attempts to escape an unsatisfying one. In essence, the choice to be happy today requires recognizing that contentment is a skill you can develop rather than a prize you must earn. When you master this skill, you discover that the happiness you've been chasing tomorrow has been available all along, waiting patiently for you to notice it in the richness of your present experience. This realization naturally leads us to examine why achieving more success often fails to deliver the satisfaction we expect it to provide. 3. Why more success won't make you happier? The real secret. Let's set the scene with David Kim's story. After 5 years of 18-hour days, David finally secured his third round of funding for his Chicago tech startup. The moment he'd dreamed about for years had arrived. His company was now valued at $50 million. Tech blogs were writing about his innovative platform, and investors were calling him the next big thing in artificial intelligence. Yet as David sat alone in his downtown office at 2 a.m., staring at congratulatory emails flooding his inbox, he felt strangely hollow. Instead of the lasting satisfaction he'd expected, he found himself already worrying about the next funding round, the pressure to scale faster, and the fear that he might not live up to the hype. David's experience reveals a counterintuitive truth that ancient Stoic philosophers understood deeply. External success, no matter how impressive, cannot provide the lasting happiness we expect it to deliver. This isn't because success is inherently bad or because we should avoid achievement. Rather, it's because we fundamentally misunderstand where genuine satisfaction actually comes from. To grasp why this happens, we need to understand how your brain processes achievement and reward. When you accomplish something significant, your brain releases dopamine, creating a genuine feeling of pleasure and satisfaction. However, this neurochemical response is designed to be temporary. Your brain quickly returns to its baseline state and begins seeking the next achievement that might provide another dopamine hit. This biological mechanism served our ancestors well by motivating them to continue seeking food, shelter, and other survival necessities. But in modern life, it creates an exhausting cycle where each success becomes merely the starting point for the next pursuit. The Stoics observed this pattern in their own time. Seneca, despite his enormous wealth and political influence, wrote extensively about how external achievements provide only fleeting satisfaction. He watched fellow Romans accumulate vast fortunes and prestigious positions, yet remain fundamentally unsettled and anxious. These individuals weren't ungrateful or inherently unhappy people. They were simply expecting external circumstances to provide a type of fulfillment that external circumstances cannot deliver. Consider how this plays out in contemporary life. You might know people who seemed to have everything you thought you wanted, yet appeared surprisingly stressed, anxious, or unfulfilled. Perhaps you've experienced this yourself. You worked hard for a promotion, finally received it, felt great for a week or two, then found yourself focused on the next level up. Or maybe you saved for months to buy something special, enjoyed it briefly, then noticed your attention shifting to other things you didn't yet have. This pattern isn't a personal failing or character flaw. It's simply how achievement-based happiness functions. External success provides what psychologists call extrinsic motivation, which depends on rewards, recognition, and circumstances outside your direct control. While extrinsic rewards can motivate excellent work and drive innovation, they cannot provide the deep, stable satisfaction that comes from intrinsic sources like personal growth, meaningful relationships, and alignment with your values. The Stoics discovered that lasting contentment comes from what they called inner wealth rather than external possessions or achievements. Inner wealth includes qualities like wisdom, virtue, resilience, and the ability to find meaning in your daily experience, regardless of external circumstances. Unlike external success, which can be lost through economic downturns, industry changes, or simple bad luck, inner wealth becomes stronger through practice and remains available even when external conditions change. Think about David's situation through this lens. His startup success is genuinely impressive and worthy of celebration. However, if his sense of worth and satisfaction depends entirely on maintaining and exceeding this level of external achievement, he's built his happiness on an inherently unstable foundation. Market conditions could change, competitors could emerge, or countless other factors beyond his control could affect his company's trajectory. Meanwhile, the qualities that enabled his success, such as creativity, persistence, problem-solving skills, and the ability to lead a team, represent forms of inner wealth that remain valuable regardless of any particular business outcome. The real secret to sustainable happiness lies in developing appreciation for both your external circumstances and your internal qualities simultaneously. This means celebrating your achievements while recognizing that your fundamental worth and contentment don't depend on maintaining or surpassing those achievements. You can enjoy success without needing it, appreciate recognition without craving it, and pursue goals without attaching your identity to the outcomes. This approach requires what the Stoics called a philosophical perspective. When you achieve something significant, you can genuinely appreciate the accomplishment while understanding that it represents just one moment in a much larger journey. You recognize that the skills, relationships, and personal growth that made the achievement possible are more valuable than the achievement itself, because these inner resources will continue serving you long after any particular success has faded from memory. Practically speaking, this means regularly acknowledging what you've learned and how you've grown through your efforts, regardless of specific outcomes. When David reflects on his startup journey, he might appreciate how he developed leadership skills, learned to handle uncertainty, built meaningful professional relationships, and discovered creative solutions to complex problems. These forms of inner wealth will benefit him throughout his life, whether his current company succeeds or fails. The Stoics also taught that true success includes the ability to remain grounded and centered regardless of external circumstances. This means being equally comfortable with praise and criticism, with abundance and scarcity, with recognition and anonymity. This isn't indifference or lack of ambition. Rather, it's the freedom that comes from building your identity on stable internal foundations rather than fluctuating external conditions. When you understand why external success can't provide lasting happiness, you're free to pursue achievements for healthier reasons. You can work toward goals because you find the process meaningful, because you want to contribute something valuable, or because you enjoy developing your capabilities. These motivations create sustainable satisfaction because they don't depend on specific outcomes or other people's responses to your work. Essentially, the secret isn't to avoid success or stop pursuing meaningful goals. Instead, it's to recognize that genuine happiness comes from the person you become through your efforts rather than the external rewards those efforts might generate. This understanding naturally leads us to explore how you can make the fundamental choice that puts lasting contentment within your control, regardless of what happens around you. 4. The happiness choice that changes everything, Marcus Aurelius method. Picture this moment in time. Maria Rodriguez clocks in for another double shift at Seattle General Hospital, her third consecutive 16-hour day this week. As an emergency room nurse, she's dealing with understaffed conditions, demanding patients, and the emotional weight of life and death situations. Her feet ache before her shift even begins, and she knows she'll barely see her family again today. Yet, as she walks through the hospital corridors, something remarkable happens. Instead of focusing on her exhaustion and frustration, Maria makes a conscious decision to appreciate the opportunity to help people during their most vulnerable moments. She chooses to find meaning in the small acts of comfort she provides throughout her shift. Maria has discovered what Marcus Aurelius called the most powerful choice available to any human being. The Roman emperor, despite ruling an empire plagued by wars, plagues, and political intrigue, realized that happiness is fundamentally a decision you make each day rather than a condition that happens to you. This insight transformed how he approached both personal challenges and the enormous responsibilities of leadership. Understanding this choice requires recognizing a crucial distinction that most people never learn. You cannot control what happens to you, but you can always control how you interpret and respond to what happens to you. This isn't positive thinking or forced optimism. Rather, it's a recognition that your emotional experience depends more on the meaning you assign to events than on the events themselves. Marcus Aurelius developed this understanding through direct experience with hardship. He spent years away from his family managing military campaigns along dangerous frontiers. He watched close friends die from disease. He dealt with political betrayals and the constant pressure of making decisions that affected millions of people. Through these challenges, he discovered that external circumstances could not determine his inner state unless he allowed them to. Let me help you understand how this choice functions in practical terms. When something difficult happens, your mind automatically begins creating a story about what this event means. You might tell yourself that a setback proves you're not capable, that criticism means you're failing, or that disappointment indicates something is fundamentally wrong with your life. These interpretations feel automatic and true, but they're actually choices you're making about how to frame your experience. Marcus Aurelius learned to pause during difficult moments and consciously choose more empowering interpretations. When faced with a military defeat, instead of seeing it as evidence of his inadequacy as a leader, he could view it as an opportunity to develop resilience and learn better strategies. When dealing with difficult people, rather than focusing on their annoying behaviors, he could appreciate the chance to practice patience and understanding. This mental discipline isn't about denying reality or pretending everything is wonderful. Marcus Aurelius faced genuine hardships and acknowledged them honestly. However, he refused to compound his difficulties by adding unnecessary suffering through negative interpretations. He understood that life contains enough real challenges without manufacturing additional misery through pessimistic thinking. The emperor's method involves what we might call conscious reframing. Throughout his day, he would actively look for aspects of his experience that deserved appreciation, even during difficult periods. When stuck in tedious political meetings, he might appreciate the opportunity to understand different perspectives. When dealing with physical discomfort during long military campaigns, he could find satisfaction in his ability to endure hardship for a meaningful cause. This practice works because it trains your brain to notice positive elements that exist in every situation, even challenging ones. Consider how this applies to Maria's hospital shifts. She could focus entirely on the exhaustion, difficult working conditions, and time away from family. These aspects are real and valid concerns. However, she can simultaneously appreciate the meaningful nature of her work, the gratitude expressed by patients she helps, the teamwork with colleagues, and the development of her professional skills. The key insight is that both perspectives contain truth. The challenging aspects of any situation are real, but so are the opportunities for growth, meaning, and satisfaction. Marcus Aurelius's method involves consciously choosing to give equal or greater attention to the positive elements rather than automatically fixating on the negative ones. This choice becomes easier when you understand its cumulative effect on your overall well-being. Each time you consciously choose a more empowering interpretation of your circumstances, you're building what psychologists call psychological resilience. You're training your mind to find resources and opportunities rather than just problems and limitations. Over time, this practice creates a stable foundation of contentment that doesn't fluctuate wildly based on external circumstances. Marcus Aurelius also discovered that this choice must be renewed daily, often multiple times per day. Happiness isn't a permanent state you achieve once and then maintain forever. Rather, it's an ongoing decision you make in response to whatever life presents. This is actually empowering news because it means you're never stuck with yesterday's emotional state. Each new moment offers a fresh opportunity to choose how you want to experience your life. The practical application begins with developing awareness of your automatic interpretations. Throughout your day, notice the stories your mind tells about what various events mean. When you catch yourself creating unnecessarily negative narratives, pause and ask what other interpretations might be equally valid. Look for aspects of the situation that could be viewed as opportunities, lessons, or reasons for appreciation. This doesn't mean forcing yourself to feel grateful for genuinely difficult circumstances. Instead, it means recognizing that even challenging situations often contain elements that deserve acknowledgement. You might appreciate your own strength in handling adversity, the support offered by friends, the clarity that comes from facing problems directly, or simply your capacity to grow through difficult experiences. Marcus Aurelius summarized this wisdom beautifully when he wrote that very little is needed to make a happy life. It's all within yourself, in your way of thinking. When you master the choice to interpret your circumstances in ways that support your well-being rather than undermine it, you discover a form of happiness that remains available regardless of what happens around you. Consequently, the happiness choice transforms your relationship with both success and setbacks, creating a stable center that allows you to appreciate good times without being devastated by difficult ones. This foundation of inner stability naturally leads us to examine what factors should actually influence your emotional well-being and which ones you can safely ignore. 5. Focus on what you can control and watch happiness follow. Allow me to set the scene with Carlos Rivera's transformation. As a junior at the University of Miami, Carlos spent countless hours obsessing over his college applications to graduate programs. He refreshed his email constantly, checked application portals multiple times daily, and lost sleep worrying about admission committee decisions that were completely beyond his influence. His anxiety peaked when he realized he was spending more mental energy on things he couldn't control than on his current coursework, relationships, and personal growth. That's when Carlos discovered a life-changing principle from the ancient philosopher Epictetus that completely transformed his approach to stress and happiness. Epictetus, who lived from slavery to becoming one of history's most influential teachers, developed what might be the most practical wisdom ever created for managing anxiety and finding peace. He taught that there are only two categories of things in life. Some things are up to us, meaning within our direct control, while other things are not up to us, meaning outside our control. According to Epictetus, all human suffering comes from confusing these two categories and trying to control what cannot be controlled. This distinction seems simple on the surface, but its implications are revolutionary for how you experience daily life. Think about how much mental and emotional energy you spend worrying about outcomes that depend on other people's decisions, market conditions, weather, traffic, or countless other factors beyond your influence. When you worry about these uncontrollable elements, you're essentially trying to manage the impossible while neglecting the areas where your efforts can actually make a difference. Epictetus identified exactly what falls into each category to eliminate any confusion about where to focus your attention. The things that are up to you include your thoughts, your decisions, your values, your effort, your responses to situations, and your choices about how to interpret events. These represent your sphere of control, and according to Epictetus, these are the only things that should determine your happiness or peace of mind. The things that are not up to you include other people's opinions and decisions, the outcomes of your efforts, your reputation, external rewards and recognition, natural events like weather, and essentially everything that happens outside your own mind and actions. This category includes far more than most people realize, which explains why so many individuals feel anxious and powerless much of the time. Let's examine how this wisdom applies to Carlos's graduate school anxiety. His worrying about admission decisions represents a classic example of trying to control what's not up to him. The admissions committees will make their decisions based on their own criteria, institutional needs, and countless factors that Carlos cannot influence. However, several important elements remain completely within his control, including the quality of effort he puts into his current studies, how well he prepares for interviews if invited, and most importantly, how he chooses to respond regardless of what decisions the committees make. When Carlos shifted his focus from uncontrollable outcomes to controllable actions, something remarkable happened. His anxiety decreased dramatically because he was no longer wasting mental energy on impossible tasks. Simultaneously, his performance in controllable areas improved because he could dedicate his full attention to activities that actually responded to his efforts. He began studying more effectively, building better relationships with professors who could provide recommendations, and developing backup plans that excited him rather than serving as disappointing consolation prizes. This transformation illustrates why Epictetus claimed that focusing on your sphere of control is the path to both effectiveness and peace of mind. When you direct your energy toward things you can actually influence, you become more powerful in those areas while eliminating the stress that comes from trying to manage the unmanageable. You stop fighting battles you cannot win and start winning battles you previously ignored. The practical application of this principle requires developing what we might call control awareness throughout your day. This means regularly asking yourself whether the things occupying your mental attention fall into the category of up to you or not up to you. When you catch yourself worrying about uncontrollable factors, you can gently redirect your focus to related elements that do fall within your influence. For example, if you're stressed about a job interview outcome, you can't control the interviewer's decision, but you can control how thoroughly you prepare, how professionally you present yourself, and how you choose to interpret the experience regardless of the result. If you're worried about a relationship conflict, you can't control the other person's responses, but you can control your own communication, your willingness to listen, and your commitment to treating the other person with respect. Epictetus taught that this practice becomes easier when you understand that your happiness should depend only on things within your control. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to outcomes or not caring about results. Rather, it means building your sense of satisfaction and self-worth on factors that respond to your efforts rather than on external circumstances that may or may not align with your preferences. This approach creates what psychologists call an internal locus of control, where you recognize your power to influence your experience through your choices and actions. People with a strong internal locus of control tend to be more resilient, less anxious, and more effective in pursuing their goals because they focus their energy where it can actually make a difference. The philosopher also discovered that this principle works in reverse. When you try to control things that are not up to you, you inevitably experience frustration and powerlessness because you're attempting impossible tasks. This creates a negative cycle where perceived failure in uncontrollable areas undermines your confidence in areas where you do have genuine influence. Epictetus summarized this wisdom in a powerful statement. There is only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things that are beyond the power of our will. When you master this fundamental distinction between what is and isn't within your control, you discover a reliable path to both inner peace and external effectiveness. Therefore, focusing on your sphere of control provides the foundation for sustainable happiness because it directs your attention toward areas where your efforts can actually create positive change. This realization prepares us to explore the transformative power of a simple word that successful people often struggle to embrace, yet holds the key to lasting satisfaction. 6. Master the art of saying enough. Life-changing power. Visualize this scenario unfolding in Austin's vibrant music scene. Jake Thompson releases his third independent album on streaming platforms, and within the first week, it receives 50,000 plays and dozens of positive reviews from music blogs. For most independent artists, this would represent tremendous success. However, Jake finds himself immediately scrolling through social media, comparing his numbers to artists with millions of streams. Instead of celebrating his achievement, he feels inadequate because his success doesn't match the viral breakouts he sees online. Jake has stumbled into a trap that destroys more dreams and steals more joy than almost any other mental pattern in our achievement-driven culture. The trap Jake faces illustrates why learning to say enough represents one of the most powerful skills you can develop for lasting happiness. This isn't about lowering your standards or abandoning ambition. Rather, it's about recognizing when you've achieved something meaningful and allowing yourself to experience genuine satisfaction before immediately reaching for the next goal. The ability to appreciate your current level of success while continuing to grow represents a sophisticated form of wisdom that most people never develop. To understand why this skill matters so profoundly, consider how achievement culture programs your brain to never feel satisfied. From childhood, you're taught that each accomplishment should immediately become the launching pad for the next challenge. Good grades should lead to better grades, which should lead to prestigious colleges, which should lead to impressive careers, which should lead to constant advancement and recognition. This mindset creates what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill, where each achievement briefly elevates your mood before you return to baseline and start pursuing the next level. The ancient Stoics recognized this pattern and developed a fundamentally different approach to success and satisfaction. They understood that the word enough contains extraordinary power because it allows you to step off the endless treadmill of comparison and competition. When you can genuinely say enough about an achievement, relationship, or life circumstance, you're declaring independence from the external validation system that keeps most people perpetually anxious and dissatisfied. This concept becomes clearer when you understand the difference between healthy ambition and insatiable craving. Healthy ambition involves pursuing meaningful goals because you find the process fulfilling, because you want to contribute something valuable, or because you enjoy developing your capabilities. This type of motivation creates sustainable satisfaction because it doesn't depend on outperforming others or achieving specific external outcomes. Insatiable craving, by contrast, involves pursuing achievements primarily to prove your worth, gain status, or fill an internal sense of inadequacy. This motivation can never be satisfied because it's based on comparison and external validation rather than internal fulfillment. Jake's streaming numbers illustrate this distinction perfectly. His music genuinely connected with 50,000 people, creating real value and meaningful artistic expression. This achievement deserves celebration and appreciation regardless of how it compares to other artists' numbers. However, if Jake's satisfaction depends on having more streams than other musicians, he's trapped in an impossible game where someone else's success diminishes his own accomplishment. The Stoics taught that learning to say enough requires understanding what true wealth actually means. True wealth isn't having everything you want, but rather wanting what you have. This perspective transforms how you evaluate your achievements, relationships, and life circumstances. Instead of constantly measuring your situation against theoretical ideals or other people's highlights, you learn to recognize the genuine value and satisfaction available in your current reality. This shift in perspective has practical implications for how you approach your goals and ambitions. When you can appreciate your current level of achievement, you're free to pursue additional goals from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. Your efforts become expressions of creativity and growth rather than desperate attempts to prove your worth or escape dissatisfaction. This mindset actually tends to improve your performance because you're not carrying the psychological burden of needing specific outcomes to feel good about yourself. Implementing this wisdom requires developing what we might call achievement appreciation skills. This involves regularly taking time to acknowledge and celebrate your genuine accomplishments rather than immediately focusing on what you haven't yet achieved. For Jake, this might mean spending time reading the positive reviews his album received, reflecting on the creative growth he experienced during the recording process, and appreciating the connections he's made with listeners who resonate with his music. The practice also involves understanding that success isn't a zero-sum game where other people's achievements diminish your own. When Jake sees another artist with millions of streams, he can appreciate their success without interpreting it as evidence of his own inadequacy. He can recognize that the music industry, like most creative fields, has room for many different types of success, and that his own path doesn't need to mirror anyone else's trajectory. Learning to say enough also protects you from the psychological costs of constant striving. When you can appreciate your current achievements, You avoid the exhaustion and anxiety that come from never feeling satisfied with your progress. You create space for other aspects of life, including relationships, personal growth, and simple enjoyment that contribute to overall well-being but might be neglected if you're constantly focused on the next achievement. This doesn't mean becoming complacent or giving up on meaningful goals. Instead, it means developing the ability to hold two truths simultaneously. You can be genuinely satisfied with your current circumstances while also working toward improvements and new challenges. This balanced approach allows you to enjoy your journey rather than postponing satisfaction until you reach some future destination that may or may not provide the fulfillment you expect. The Stoics discovered that people who master the art of saying enough tend to be more creative, more resilient, and paradoxically more successful than those who never feel satisfied. When you're not desperately chasing external validation, you're free to take creative risks, learn from failures, and pursue authentic interests rather than just following conventional markers of success. In essence, the power of enough lies in its ability to free you from the endless cycle of comparison and competition that exhausts so many people in our achievement-oriented culture. When you can genuinely appreciate what you've accomplished and what you currently have, you discover a form of wealth that no external circumstances can take away. This foundation of contentment naturally leads us to explore how to find lasting satisfaction in the process of pursuing your goals rather than depending solely on achieving specific outcomes. 7. Fall in love with your journey, not just the destination. Set the scene in Denver's beautiful foothills, where Amanda Torres laces up her running shoes for what began as a weight loss journey 6 months ago. When she started, Amanda fixated entirely on reaching her goal weight, checking the scale daily, and feeling frustrated when the numbers didn't drop as quickly as she hoped. However, something shifted along the way that transformed her entire relationship with fitness and health. She began noticing how much she enjoyed her morning runs through the mountain trails, the mental clarity that came from regular exercise, and the sense of accomplishment from gradually building her endurance. Now, instead of obsessing over the destination weight, Amanda finds herself genuinely excited about each day's run and the small improvements she experiences along the way. Amanda's transformation illustrates one of the most profound insights the Stoic philosophers developed about human motivation and satisfaction. They discovered that lasting happiness comes from learning to find fulfillment in the process of pursuing your goals rather than depending entirely on achieving specific outcomes. This shift in focus doesn't eliminate ambition or reduce your effectiveness. Instead, it creates a sustainable source of motivation and satisfaction that remains available regardless of whether particular goals work out exactly as planned. Understanding why this principle works requires examining how most people approach their ambitions and why this typical approach often leads to disappointment. Most individuals treat their daily efforts as necessary sacrifices they must endure to eventually reach a rewarding destination. They postpone satisfaction until they achieve their goal weight, get the promotion, finish the degree, or accomplish whatever outcome currently drives their efforts. This mindset creates what psychologists call destination addiction, where you believe happiness exists somewhere else, at some other time under different circumstances. The fundamental problem with destination-focused motivation is that it makes your emotional well-being hostage to outcomes you cannot completely control. Even when you work diligently and intelligently toward your goals, countless factors beyond your influence affect whether you achieve exactly what you originally envisioned. Market conditions change, competition emerges, personal circumstances shift, or you simply discover that your priorities evolve as you grow and learn more about yourself and the world. The Stoics developed a radically different approach that liberated them from this dependence on uncertain outcomes. They taught that virtue and satisfaction should come from the quality of effort you put forth rather than the external results your efforts produce. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to outcomes or not caring whether your goals succeed. Rather, it means building your sense of accomplishment and identity on factors that remain within your control regardless of external circumstances. Consider how this wisdom applies to Amanda's fitness journey. When she focused exclusively on reaching a target weight, her satisfaction fluctuated based on daily scale readings that could be influenced by water retention, hormonal changes, or natural body fluctuations completely unrelated to her actual progress. However, when she shifted her attention to appreciating the daily process of running, she discovered sources of fulfillment that were immediately available and completely under her control. She could feel proud of showing up for her workout regardless of what the scale said. She could appreciate her growing endurance, her improved sleep quality, and her increased energy levels throughout the day. This process-focused approach creates what researchers call intrinsic motivation, which tends to be more sustainable and satisfying than motivation based on external rewards or recognition. When you find genuine enjoyment in the activities required to pursue your goals, you create a positive feedback loop where the journey itself provides ongoing satisfaction rather than requiring you to wait for distant payoffs that may or may not materialize as expected. The practical application of this philosophy involves consciously identifying aspects of your current efforts that deserve appreciation and attention. This might include the skills you're developing, the discipline you're building, the relationships you're forming, or simply the satisfaction that comes from engaging in meaningful work. For someone pursuing a career change, this could mean appreciating the learning process, the courage required to try something new, and the personal growth that comes from stepping outside your comfort zone, rather than focusing exclusively on landing a specific job. Learning to love the process also provides psychological resilience when you encounter setbacks or discover that your original goals need adjustment. When your satisfaction comes primarily from the quality of your daily efforts, temporary failures or changed circumstances don't devastate your sense of progress and accomplishment. You can adapt your specific objectives while maintaining the fulfillment that comes from consistent engagement with meaningful activities. The Stoics understood that this approach actually tends to improve your chances of achieving external success because it eliminates the anxiety and desperation that often undermine performance. When you're genuinely enjoying the process, you can take creative risks, learn from mistakes, and persist through challenges without the psychological burden of needing specific outcomes to feel good about yourself. Your efforts become expressions of your values and interests rather than desperate attempts to prove your worth or escape current dissatisfaction. This mindset shift requires regular practice and conscious attention because our culture constantly reinforces destination-focused thinking through advertising, social media, and achievement-oriented messaging. You need to deliberately cultivate appreciation for process-oriented rewards like learning, growth, creativity, contribution, and the satisfaction that comes from engaging fully with challenging activities. The transformation becomes easier when you understand that falling in love with your journey doesn't require giving up your ambitions or lowering your standards. Instead, it means expanding your definition of success to include the person you're becoming through your efforts and the experiences you're having along the way. You can pursue ambitious goals while simultaneously appreciating the daily opportunities for growth and satisfaction that your pursuit provides. Clearly, then, When you master the art of finding fulfillment in your journey rather than postponing satisfaction until you reach specific destinations, you discover a renewable source of motivation and contentment that remains available regardless of external circumstances. This process-oriented approach to happiness provides the perfect foundation for implementing all the Stoic principles we've explored together and creating a sustainable practice that can transform your relationship with success, setbacks, and daily life itself. Your Stoic happiness practice starts right now. Think of everything we've explored together today like learning to see with new eyes. Just as someone who's been nearsighted their whole life suddenly puts on glasses and discovers a world of detail they never knew existed, you now have the philosophical tools to recognize happiness and contentment that was always available, but perhaps overlooked in your daily experience. Let's take a moment to appreciate the complete picture we've built together. We started by understanding how Seneca's wisdom about true poverty reveals that satisfaction comes from appreciating what you have rather than constantly wanting more. We learned why chasing tomorrow's happiness keeps you trapped in an endless cycle of postponed contentment, and how Marcus Aurelius discovered that happiness is always a choice available in the present moment. We explored why external success, no matter how impressive, cannot provide the lasting fulfillment our achievement-oriented culture promises it will deliver. Instead, we discovered that genuine contentment comes from developing what the Stoics called inner wealth, which includes qualities like wisdom, resilience, and the ability to find meaning regardless of external circumstances. The journey continued as we learned Epictetus's powerful teaching about focusing only on what falls within your control, which immediately reduces anxiety while increasing your effectiveness in areas where your efforts can actually make a difference. We discovered the transformative power of saying enough, which frees you from the exhausting comparison trap that steals joy from so many people's achievements. Finally, we explored how falling in love with your daily process creates sustainable motivation and satisfaction that doesn't depend on uncertain outcomes or external validation. Each of these principles works individually, but together they create a comprehensive approach to happiness that the ancient Stoics tested through centuries of real-world application. Now comes the most important part of our entire discussion. Everything you've learned today remains just interesting information unless you begin applying these concepts immediately in your own life. Think of this like learning to ride a bicycle. You can understand the theory perfectly, but the real transformation happens when you start practicing these mental skills in your daily experience. Here's how to begin right now. Tonight, before you go to sleep, spend just 5 minutes identifying 3 specific things from today that you can genuinely appreciate. Be concrete and detailed rather than general. Notice how this simple practice begins shifting your attention toward abundance rather than scarcity. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up, consciously choose to approach your day with Marcus Aurelius's wisdom about happiness being available today rather than postponing satisfaction until conditions improve. Throughout your week, practice Epictetus's teaching by asking yourself whether the things occupying your mental energy fall into the category of up to you or not up to you. These ancient principles have guided people through wars, economic collapses, personal tragedies, and every conceivable challenge for over 2,000 years. They work because they address fundamental truths about human psychology and the nature of lasting satisfaction. If this exploration of Stoic wisdom has resonated with you, I encourage you to subscribe to the Stoic Vivu channel, where we regularly transform ancient philosophy into practical guidance for modern life. Like this video if it provided value, share it with friends who might benefit from these timeless insights, And let me know in the comments which Stoic principle you're most excited to implement in your own life. Your journey towards sustainable happiness and inner peace begins with your very next decision. The ancient wisdom is yours now. Use it well.